alternate care education has been specializing in alternate care therapies. We do a lot of biofeedback, Bionetics, laser allergy protocols, emotional recalibration. But in May 2009, my wife and I we went to the School of Hard Knocks because Tyler was born with what's called gastroschisis. It's a short gut syndrome that results in acute dehydration syndrome. That's a really big handle for basically being born inside out. If you look at that tube, you'll see that looks like it's full of sausages. That's what's left that didn't go back in. When we first saw Skylar, she was actually in a sterile trash bag. All of her stomach actually hooked up and didn't allow her umbilical cord to close up. So her umbilical cord was floating literally unattached to the wall of the body. And so her stomach came out, and her liver, pancreas, spleen, large intestine, small intestine, her right ovary were all on the outside. And so we were obviously rushed to Scottish Rite, where they did this wonderful little procedure, and you see is the remains of her intestines that are in that tube. You can see how full it is, and what they do is they try to squeeze the tube from the top down and put everything back in. Well, when you think it's bad, you don't realize that it can get to be worse. Oops. This next slide is when the bowel breaks. She ended up with a colostomy for 8 weeks, and then she had a reversal, and we had a little bit of a reprieve, and then the bowel got sick again, and they had to do what's called a resection, which is where they cut out a portion of the bowel, and she was on another colostomy and then another reversal, and so it was a long road. When I talk about it affecting our family, this is our other child, Lexi. She is the next in line. I've actually got 4 kids, but Lexi used to go to the hospital with us every day to rock her baby sister. Our oldest was one of the youngest goalkeepers to make the Olympic development team, and she had to give up soccer just because we couldn't travel, we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't get her to practices. So when you have something like this, it really affects your whole family in a way that, unless you've been through something like this, you just really can't comprehend it. And so we really became passionate about the water. The eyes of my angel. This is Skylar on one of her little reprieves between a couple of surgeries. She has the most intense blue eyes of anybody I think I've ever met. And the problem is when the acute dehydration portion of this disease or this condition sets in, when the bowel shuts down, it starts to dump all the fluids. You can't get anything into the body, and you end up with something like this in just a very short amount of time. When you walk into the largest children's hospital in the Southeast at Scottish Rite, in the emergency room, and they meet you at the door, and you have all of the doctors, all of the nursing staff looking to hydrate your child, and they leave the lady at the check-in, and there's a line. It's not a good day. That happens once, and you're like, that'll never happen again. And of course it did, but that's what started my journey into all the weird hydration drops and alkaline water and alkalizers and just anything to prevent what you see on the screen. I have tried literally 7 to 8 different water ionizers and had given up on them, and I'll get into that in a moment. But you can see what happens. Once she, this is another portion where she ended up with what's called a Mickey button. It's a feeding tube that bypasses trying to eat, and you can just hook her up onto force feed. And so she was on force feed 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Well, the bowel would get tired, it would just stop. And so if you can imagine what diapers are for a sick child, just imagine what they are for a child that's on force feeds. The diapers were horrible every morning. It was literally running out of the crib, her stuffed animals, her toys, her blankets. Her residual issues, she was in Scottish Rite literally for 11 and a half months. She was released just shortly before her first birthday. She was released with 100 hours a week of home health care. That was through her second year, and we finally got her eating and got things going better. But in the third year, we ended up with severe cramping, gas, distension. She had a diaper rash that looked a lot like we opened a pack of hamburger meat, and you lift it up, and the juice on the bottom, that was kind of what her bottom looked like because she was dumping acid literally into her diaper. And so all that was going on when Amy Tyler came into the office in October of 2012. And since I had already tried so many water alkaline units that I was totally opposed to it, this one was even worse because it was a multi-level company, and I don't do that stuff. Well, as we argued, debated, and everything, she happened to be on the table several weeks later when some of Skylar's test results came in. And she had been diagnosed with full-blown failure to thrive, anemia, and blood in the stool, amongst other things. And so I'm pretty stubborn, but I was like, you know what? That still small voice inside said, just let her try the water. And Amy pipes up and literally says, now you have to remember, I'm about to adjust her neck. Skylar doesn't have to suffer because you're too stubborn to try the water. And I basically said, look, bring the water. And I was just trying to get her out of my office. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to deal with it. I've already tried it. It didn't work. Well, she left, came back, and 10 minutes later we had a jug, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Well, we gave Skylar the water. And that was like a Thursday, Friday. And she said, you're going to want to get more water on Monday because the charge lasts 3 or 4. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just go. And my wife will attest to the fact that when I brought it home, I was like, here's the jug of water from Amy and whatever. Let her try it, see what it does. Well, come Monday morning, I'm calling Amy going, I need a little more water. She goes, it worked, didn't it? And I was like, well, I wouldn't say that it worked, but it's showing significant clinical benefit. You know, I'm trying to like process this. But that whole distension, gas, the cramping was gone. And about 10 days later, I was getting ready in the morning, and I was shaving, and all of a sudden I hear Skylar scream. Now, we live north of Atlanta in the North Georgia mountains, and so we have snakes and copperheads and water moccasins and all that great stuff. And she screamed and said, there's a snake in the bathroom. So I went running, and I said, where is it? She goes, it's in the potty. And it was the first solid bowel movement she had, and it was coiled up in the toilet. And it freaked her out because this is a child that, having been on force feeds, had only had a liquid stool her whole life. Well, the rest of that story is 6 months later, we actually ended up removing the Mickey button. This is her in her dance recital, doing her tutu. We did it a month before we went to Japan. Now she's doing gymnastics. She does handstands and cartwheels and back bends and flips on the trampoline, and it literally gave us back our life. It was an amazing experience to go to Japan. That's where John and I met. But if we hadn't been able to remove the Mickey button, we wouldn't have been able to go to Japan. Because, oh, here's my child. It may rip out. Just stick it back. I mean, nobody wants to babysit that. And so you really do become constrained by what's going on. I'm glad to say that's all behind us now. She's doing fabulous. But that started me on the journey of why the water? I mean, I tried them all. They all worked ineffectively. They had no real benefit. But this water worked literally miracles. And basically, because we haven't...
What other water ionizers had you tried before?
Oh, we had a Microlite. We had a Royal. I'd used the Jupiter, the Melody, Aqualive, the Valera. I mean, we'd run the gamut, and it just didn't work. And when it came down to it, we had an ultra-phenomenal alternative wellness care center. Combine that with Scottish Rite Children's Hospital, she was getting the best of everything. But all that added up to the 28% that's not water, because we are 72% water. And that said, it seemed like a cure, but it wasn't. It's basic science, actually. It realistically could save your life, but if you don't make healthier choices, your health benefits could be short-lived. We use it with all of our patients. We give it away free in our clinic. But what it does is it gives you the best possible 72% of your body to work with. That helps get the nutrition into the cell, helps you detoxify the other stuff out. At the same time, it's increasing the energy of the cell membranes, and health and healing can continue. Like I said, it wasn't the only thing that we did, but it was the missing piece that made all the other things work really fast. And I like to make sure that people understand that. So here's what's going on. If you think of a saltwater aquarium, you know, those some expensive fish in there. They're really subtle. They need a really specific pH. They need oxygen and energy in the tissues. If you don't take this enclosed system, you end up with a dirty fish tank. And the human body gets molds and fungus and yeast and viruses and bacteria and all that stuff, just like the scum that's in there, the algae that's in that fish tank. The job becomes cleaning out your aquarium, getting your body well from the inside out. That's really what we focus on. We don't treat any conditions. We don't treat any diseases. We simply work on getting your body cleaned up so that it can work really efficiently. What it goes to work on, that's up to the body. That's not up to me. We can kind of direct it and steer it, but really what we want to do is take your body from this to this so that it can get things going. And here's how we do it. Cellular respiration is a process by which you get good stuff into the cell, get the bad stuff out. You want to get as much oxygen and nutrition into your cells so that you can be healthy, cellular respiration, breathing, energy, activity. At the same time, you want to pull out the CO2 that's left there and the toxins that are left over from cellular metabolism. So how does that work? Well, the short technical answer is cellular respiration is this yellow membrane. You'll see all the H's in there. That's part of the magic of the enagic system, is it creates a high level of available hydrogen for the body. That's what charges the cell membrane so that you can then turn around and create mitochondrial activity, which is how you get aerobic activity out of the cells. The other aspect of this water, they call it microclustering. Microclustering is actually a misnomer. It describes the concept. There's actually a video on YouTube that says Dr. Michael explains microclustering and restructuring. If you change the structure of a water molecule, it's not water. H3O is not water. Water is H2O. But what happens is, as you use these aquaporins to hydrate, the more energy the water molecule has, the more it disperses so that it can get through these aquaporins more effectively. For instance, the blood-brain barrier, your eye, they have a high level of aquaporin concentrations, not just hydrophobic, hydrophilic, which is a big fancy term for it just goes across through osmosis. They're the plumbing systems for the cell. They do glycerin. They do CO2, ammonia, the toxins. Again, like I said, it's getting the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. But that third bullet, it says they're impermeable to charged species such as protons. So what happens is that ORP of negative 800 millivolts gets hung up on the cell membrane. And that's really, really, really important, because that's what allows your cells to pulse. And by that I mean it works like a jellyfish. Your cells swell and contract, swell and contract. Well, when they swell and they open up, they bring in oxygen and nutrition. When they compress, they help excrete CO2 and toxins. It's called tensional integrity. It's been slanged tensegrity. But the short answer is, if you look at the 6 on that first red molecule, that's representative of an aquaporin. And you'll notice that there's hemoglobin in those tissues. There's a big clump. I've got a 16 to 25 water molecule. You can't get that big molecule in that little hole because it's too stuck together. So here's what we do. Imagine, if you will, you've got that cluster of grapes and you want to put them all in that bottle. Well, Mike can hand it to Skylar and say, here, put these in there. And she's going to take them off that and dump them in the jug one at a time. If you think about each grape as a water molecule that's stuck together, if you create a static electric charge on them, they kind of boom, and they separate. Well, then they streamline single file, and they'll fill right into that jug. That's the mystery of what Enagic has figured out for hydration. The interesting thing is when I went to chiropractic school and graduated in '96, they hadn't even discovered the concept of the aquaporin. That was done in 2005. So That was part of my learning curve. So, to further benefit the water, what Enagic has done is there's a process called the disassociation of water. Chemists get on here all the time and says, you can't change water, you can't change water, you can't change water. But if you get an electrochemical engineer, they said, oh yeah, all you do, if you shock the water, you give it enough charge, it disassociates the water molecule and it rips off a hydrogen molecule and gives you a hydroxyl and a hydrogen. It's the basic concept between having a hydrogen converter for your car, creates available hydrogen. Well, that's exactly what the Enagic unit does. One of the most powerful selling points that I have with any physician, because if they're even remotely current on their current neurological research, they're continuing ed, looking at the research journals, they're finding that combination of hydrogen, oxygen, and hydroxyl ions are phenomenal for the human body. They've got hyperbaric to drive more oxygen into the cell. The hydrogen is the catalyst for the cell membrane. Any doctor that's active in his current research will be able to find that. Well, when this machine works, it literally tears off a hydrogen molecule and leaves you with a hydroxyl. And as you continue through, that hydroxyl works as an antioxidant. That's another key element to this water. There are more antioxidants in one glass of high ORP water than you can get in your diet in a week. You can't possibly ingest enough alkaline foods for the perfect alkaline diet to measure the equivalent of one 12-ounce glass of high ORP water. You just can't do it because it doesn't produce it in an available state. This creates available hydrogen and oxygen right away, which brought me to that thing about the most powerful thing I saw was somebody put a cigarette lighter up to their SD501 and said, click, and it went pop, 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 and I'm like, the water's on fire. That's hydrogen. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, all those little bubbles that are going up are dissolved hydrogen and oxygen in the water. And I'm like, oh, I need that. She needs that. And so that's what we got doing. Well, the antioxidant portion, which is the hydroxyl, works on the hemoglobin. And, you know, in school they always talk about hemoglobin being in the blood and it's here. It's actually in all your tissues and cells because that's the way that the oxygen migrates and creates the exchange from inside to the outside of the cell. It's part of the red blood cells, the brain, the kidney, the lungs, the lymphatics. For the doctors online, it's in the A9 dopaminergic nerve fibers of the substantia nigra. It's in the mesenglial cells of the kidney. It's in yada, 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 yada. But in an acidic environment, iron is going to rust. If you can create an alkaline transport mechanism, that is going to reduce the oxidative stress on the hemoglobin. You will never change the pH of your blood serum levels. As soon as if you hyperventilate, you blow off too much CO2, you become alkaline. You pass out, you breathe normal. You hold your breath because you're going to pass out because my son actually tried that once. He didn't quite make it. But you build up CO2, your body passes out, all within like 0.1 on the pH scale. So you can't change your pH level of your bloodstream. What you can change is the intracellular pH, which is where they're showing this for all the neurological conditions, which I was at a neurological symposium back in October, and they were just eating up the water units because, you know, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, carries the hydrogen, carries the oxygen, the hydroxyl ion binds to the urea and the ammonia, and flushes out of the brain. So again, that's the more technical aspect of it. Short answer is a healthy cell generates energy through the use of oxygen. It'll actually break down pyruvate, and then it's oxidized in the mitochondria. An unhealthy cell, like a cancer cell, will generate energy through the non-oxidative breakdown of glucose or glycolysis. Short answer means if you have an oxygen-deprived environment, burning glucose is the only healthy response that you have. It's just how the body works. Otto Warburg proved in the 30s that all normal cells require oxygen. Cancer cells don't. If you can deprive a healthy cell of 35% of its oxygen for 48 hours, it can become damaged to the point of being dangerous. By that, he was stating that you turn the mitochondria off. If you can saturate the tissue with oxygens and reactivate the mitochondria, healthy aerobic activity starts on a cellular level. Well, if you come back to this, what I was talking about, toxic burden within the cell, this water can be used to beneficially change the intracellular pH, brain acidosis, tissue acidosis, ketosis, and diabetics, things like that, because of the way that it flushes through the aquaporin. Big thing that compares, everybody, once they see an enagic machine, they're like, had a guy did it the other day, he goes, well, what makes this unit better? And it's only $8.95, and I can get one for cheap. Well, pH and ORP are mutually exclusive. pH is the ratio of hydrogen, and when we talked about the dissociation, and you pull off a hydrogen and a hydroxyl, the two hydrogen are going to bond to create H2, which is dissolved hydrogen in liquid form. Well, you have two hydroxyls. Well, now you have a 2-to-1 ratio. That's what creates the alkalinity, and it's done through an electrical process. The other machines add calcium, magnesium, and potassium, which changes it chemically. That kind of torqued my brain for a while because I don't know about anybody else, but the first thing I did when I got my thing is, oh, those drops are for their water. So I got my litmus papers and my chem strips and all that stuff, and they didn't work. Well, that's the problem. They're chem strips, which means a chemical strip. They're looking to see if you've increased the level of calcium, potassium, etc. in the water, and it doesn't. It changes it electrically. So you have to look at it differently.
Say that again, because you have a lot of people that said they do the litmus test paper, and I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear on that, what you just said.
It's based on a chemical. That's the difference between alkaline and alkalized water. Alkaline water has been chemically changed to change the pH to a higher level. Electrolyzed water doesn't add chemicals.
So the litmus paper is mainly checking on the calcium, magnesiums in your saliva?
Can be calcium, can it be saliva, urine, blood, whichever. But you got to realize that it's also looking for specific hydrogen ions. The dissolved hydrogen is not going to cause that to fire because it's a chemical change. It's an electrical change. It creates the new bond, and you're not doing H2. It's looking for H positive, which when it goes through the electrical process, it rebinds to create H2, which is a gas form. If you use like your pool test kit, and they put it in the thing and they shake it up in a little glass, and they're like, oh, look, it didn't change colors. It usually won't, simply because you haven't added any chemicals. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of change simply because you're going acid water and alkaline water. A lot of times people say, well, does this thing filter out fluoride? Does it get this? It's interesting that fluoride's basically an acid, so whether you filter it or not, it's going to come out the acid line that you don't drink.
That's very important to remember.
Yeah. So anyways, back to this slide. A lot of these bottled waters have a pH of 7.0 or higher. The problem is their ORP is still positive. Evian More is like 174, but it's got a 9.0 pH. So you can have a high pH and a bad ORP. But you can't have a good ORP with a low pH. They're mutually exclusive. So when you start to get into the concept of how do you compare machines, the pH, the ORP, there's a lot of song and dance. Everybody calls me and goes, I'm looking at this machine and I'm looking at the power. How do I know what's going on? Well, I didn't understand electrolysis when I came up with the idea that realized that there is a difference between alkaline water and alkalized water. It's the electrical current. So I asked an electrician. And he said, when you get into that process, electrolysis is really simple. It's the amount of power times the amount of amperage times the surface area of the electrodes. That's going to give you a change. In order to create a stable water ion, ionization in a stable water format, you need nearly 220,000 PEUs. That's a potential electrolysis unit. So then I go, okay, well, give me the equation. And he said, well, what you do is you take the enagic machine, and I'll get to it in a second, actually. I think it's on the next slide. Because to create that stable water ion, if you look at the enagic machine as an ST501 specifically, it's a lightning strike in the box. You have really big plates with a lightning bolt hitting them on your countertop. And what that does is it takes that group. If you look at that small group of 5 by 5, that's 25 molecules representing water for me. 8.5 would be representative of having now shocked that to the point where you had 4 molecules burst, so you now actually have 4 groups of 6 water molecules. The more charge it hits, well, now you got 5 by 5. Or 9.5 would be 6 groups of 4 clusters. 11.5 water might be 12 groups of 2. But that little negative thing is an electron that it can donate to help work as a free radical scavenger in the human body. So when you start to look at that, when you start looking at those power factors to make the donation of electrons, you're going to see that the potential electrolysis unit is a combination of power multiplied by the surface area of the electrode. So you take watts times amps times surface area. That's a PEU. Well, the SD501 has 230 watts, 2.5 amps, and 466 square centimeters of plates. That gives you a PEU of 267,950. You would ask me what other water ionizers are used. The one that I'd settled on before this one was the microlite. So I said, let's see what I was checking in on. And it was 110 watts. It had a half amp, 117 centimeters. Gave me 6,435 PEUs. So it was running at approximately 2.4% of the SD501 power. That's why I was adding calcium and magnesium. These units don't have enough power to create a stable water ion. If it's not stable, well, they got to dump chemicals in there. That way, when they shake it up, it looks a pretty purple. It's also interesting to note, because you saw that last slide here, real quick. You're looking on there's groups of 4, groups of 5, groups of 6, those electrons. 1 amp is the equivalent of 6.241 times 10 to the 18th power. The SD501 uses 2.5 times that, or 15.7 times 10. A half amp is 3.12 times 10 to the 18th. When you're dealing with 10 to the 18th, 0.1 is just billions. And so the change that you create in this electron structure of the water with this machine, it's just phenomenal. So most people want to do an online comparison, and I say, that's fine, go look at it. And the first thing they do is they compare the SD501 to the $800 machine or the $2,000 machine. Bottom line is your $800 machines are flat out dangerous. Again, if you're current on your medical research looking at water, you're going to see that alkaline water is dangerous because there's a calcification issue. It damages the arteries, the heart, stresses the kidneys. Alkalized water is not adding that calcium and magnesium. There's also another component where they're getting some heavy metal toxicity from platinum and titanium from cheaper food-grade materials. And so that's another thing to really take into effect. I think there's another slide further on. But have them do their comparisons. If they want to compare $2,000 machines, that's great. Compare their machine to a junior. Reasonable. What you'll find is you can't compare a 110 watt unit to a 230 watt unit. It just doesn't work. That's an apple to an orange. At which point you find out that the second most powerful machine on the market, the junior, generates 50,000 PEUs. Well, that's way higher than anything else on the market. So the enagic actually has the 2 most powerful machines on the market. And that doesn't even bring into effect that the DX is up there. And, again, like I said, cheaper machines use cheaper materials. It's demonstrated by the risk associated with heavy metal toxicity in the studies due to plate degradation. If you think about a fuse, like in your car, you can ask any electrician. If you have a bigger fuse with more mass, you can put more current through it. All things being identically equal, smaller plates are going to be able to take less power. If you put an equal portion of power through it, you're going to blow the fuse. You're going to degrade the plate, you're going to melt it, break it, arc it, whatever it does. Next is, if it is underpowered, in order to change the pH, again, they have to add calcium, magnesium, or potassium in order to get that spike so it turns a pretty purple. Next thing that everybody asks me is, how much do I have to drink? My answer is, how fast do you want to feel better? Short answer is yes, sir.
Now, one question that I had, and I know you talked about this earlier to me, but you've tested out several other machines.
Right.
And what have you found in comparison to what the Enagic has?
Most machines, most every machine out there that I've personally tested fails to compare to the R. The R creates a water molecule that's stable for about 12 to 18 hours. Sometimes you can get 24 hours out of the ORP. The Valera was a great unit as long as you drink it in the first 20 minutes because the ORP is gone in about 20 minutes. Now, that was based on my water source, things like that, but it just doesn't have the ability to hold it. So the R on its power base lasts about a day. The Junior lasts 1 or 2 days. ST501 gives you 3 or 4 days, which is kind of like the lightning strike on a lake.
So when you compared it to the competition, did you say that the closest competitor that you were able to compare it to only produced 7% of what the ST501 makes? Yeah.
Aqualive, whatever, Aqualive, I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, you asked me that before and I ran the numbers. Came out to be like 12,000.
They made anywhere from like 2% to 7% of what the Enagic machine made?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to clarify that because that's huge numbers when you think about it. When you got some of these machines that are advertised, and they're all made by 2 companies pretty much. 95% of the machines on the market, they're only made by 2 companies, and that's Emcotech and Royal Water. And
right.
Essentially the same machines, and they're selling you, and everybody's got to compare themselves to the Enagic machine. And when you've done research and comparisons with over how many, 7, 8, 9 machines, 10 more?
Yeah.
Okay.
That I've personally used. Since this has happened and YouTube's gone global, I've run numbers on lots of them. What you're going to find is if you actually start to run the numbers on them and look at the plate quality, plate size, you know, a fair comparison to a $2,500 Jupiter would be to compare it against an R unit. Not a Junior, but an R. Because of its ability to create that stable water ion, to remove the dangers of calcium and magnesium and all that stuff. If you compare it to the Junior outshines it by 150%. And, you know, you can trace that back to the simple fact that it has more amperage. But, you know, plate size, solid medical grade plates versus food grade plates. 1 amp versus amp and a half, things like that.
Yeah, and I did at the 6A 2-3 meeting, I got to actually talk to the head scientist at Enagic. And the real big comparison where they can't really compare themselves to us is the way we make the plates. Now, all these machines, they say that we've got 7 plates, we got this many square inches on our plates, but the quality and the way the plates are made, these technicians are telling me, is that we actually use pharmaceutical grade platinum. No other company does that. They say it is platinum, but it's an amalgam of different metals thrown together with platinum, and they say it's platinum, but it's maybe 25-30% platinum. It's a cheap platinum. Ours is pharmaceutical grade platinum, so when the water runs across it, it's able to create the most amount of antioxidants, and it's actually embedded into the surface of the titanium, so it doesn't come off. So
have you seen Lori Tosher's report?
I'm sorry?
Have you seen Lori Tosher's report?
Yes.
She's got a 26, and if anybody needs it, I've got a copy of it. You can email me at skywaterinc@gmail.com, and I'll send it to you. Lori did the most phenomenal job as an engineer. I mean, she's got electron microscope pictures of the surface of the plates and the wiring. I mean, it's phenomenal. And she really does get into exactly what you're talking about there with the the depth and the grade of the plate. And you can, she showed pictures of it, and you can look like craters on a moon. And all that stuff is where it oxidizes. So yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So the technician, and again, that's a great thing. When I do a demonstration, what I used to do, I need to do it more, is I would give the Laura Tosha report afterwards to everybody, so that they're going to do research and they can read Laura Tosha's report and look at that and see the comparison before they even start doing the research on the internet. Now, going on to my story, the scientists that I talked to at Enagic, along with that we were talking with Bob Rodelli and Eli and I, we really wanted to understand, really why we had them there, why ours was so much better. And he said because of the quality in the plates and the titanium that's used and the platinum that's used and the way it's embedded into the surface of the plate, it's able to withstand so many amps and so many watts. The competition can't do that. They can't give it the lightning strike. They give it a little because their plates can't take that. Ours can take it and they won't split apart. They won't come apart. That's why we're having a lot of things with. We had a doctor who was explaining that she actually had a competition machine, and what's happening after time, the surface of the platinum amalgam on the other machines starts to come apart, and then you're getting into your water. Next thing you're getting into metal toxicity poisoning, and that doesn't happen with the Kangen machine. That's why ours lasts 20 to 30 years. I went and did
my personal experience on that, the microlite, the one that I'd been using, I had the bright idea to take it apart. I did film it. Yeah, the plates were horrible, and I'd only had it for a few years. I mean, they were really, really bad.
Yeah.
And again, that's just something that I've personally done. I guess I could put the video out. I did video it in case I was going to post it, and then I never posted it. I can probably post that if anybody wants me to.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I did have the opportunity to, when I was in New York about 7 months ago, I was doing some demonstrations in New York, and then was flying to Washington, D.C. to do some more demonstrations. And sitting right next to me on the plane was the attorney for Whole Foods. And I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be a great conversation traveling on the plane. And I asked him what he did. We spent about an hour talking about that, or probably about a half hour. And they asked me what I did, and I told him about the Kangen machines. He says, I have one of those. I said, great, because I actually have a Jupiter. I said, oh, okay. He said, well, actually, this is my second Jupiter. The first one fell apart after 2 years.
Yeah, pretty much.
I said, really? He says, yeah, the water wasn't the same, getting particles in the water. He said, so I bought another one. Then he says to me, as a matter of fact, this one's falling apart too. I need to get my third one. So I went and told him about the Kangen water, and he's made the switch. So here's a guy who's had 2 Jupiter machines in a matter of 4 years, ready to buy a third one. Something's wrong there. And again, it goes to what we were talking about. Go ahead.
Okay. So, back to the question at hand is, how much do I want to drink? There's a couple things that are really important on the slide, but the baseline for this is if a person weighs 160 pounds and they're 72% water, that means that they weigh 115 pounds just in water weight. That's an average. Now, people go, well, how do you know that it's 72%? That's a calculated average because of your blood plasma compared to your bone. Your blood's like 85% water. Your bone is like 35% water. So it averages out to be about 72% on whole. Well, there's 8.34 pounds per gallon of water, or approximately 14 gallons of a 160-pound person is water. If you drink a half a gallon of water a day, it's going to take you 28 days to change the water in your aquarium. Remember, dirty water, clean water. If you drink a gallon a day, it's going to take you 14 days. The other rule of thumb that we use in the office is the average healthy person should drink, somebody says, well, just drink 8 ounce glasses of water a day. Well, if you weigh 50 pounds or 500 pounds, that doesn't even give you a range. So what we try to say is, if you drink half your body weight in ounces per day, that's a good baseline. That's what you should do for normal hydration. That's just pure water. That's not, oh, I had a cup of coffee, I had a cup of tea, I drank some sodas. It's not half your body weight in ounces of fluid. It's half your body weight in water. If you went out and partied really hard on a Saturday night, You may want to go, hey, I need to flush a little bit out and detox. You'd want to do 75% of your body weight now. If we have somebody that's really, really sick, we recommend up to 100% of their body weight in ounces, depending on the condition. Do not tell people to do that. Heart conditions, kidney conditions, you got to be really careful with it. I do that in a clinical setting. When I tell somebody next door to start drinking water, I tell them to drink between 50 and 75% of their body weight in ounces, and they're going to start to see great results. Other times they say, well, what if I just drink a gallon a day, or if I'm only drinking a half gallon a day? There's your thing. The key is, I don't know about you, but if you've ever given the water to somebody else, I didn't really notice any change, chances are they didn't actually try the water correctly, or they're really basically healthy and have a clean diet anyhow. And the reason that's noted at the bottom of that slide is, one 12-ounce can of soda will require nearly 5 gallons of high ORP water to neutralize it. That goes to 10 gallons of like 8.5 water. You can't really get and re-neutralize any soda in the human body. Here's a demo that I do on everybody. Typical pH scale hanging on the wall. Red's bad, purple's good. This is a 32-ounce glass of 9.5 water. You can tell by the drops that it's a really pretty purple. It's 9.5 water. That third slide is a bottle of Sprite. I won't say 7-Up. And it's got a tablespoon of Sprite in there. You can barely see it, but it's bright orange. Well, what I did is I said, let's see if I can neutralize a tablespoon of Sprite with, say, 5 tablespoons of water. And then I ended up filling up the cup. Well, you can't. The ratio of acidity to alkalinity is just absurd. So then I filled the cup up and the whole thing became acid. Then I took the cup and I started to dump it into that 32 ounces. So 1 tablespoon of diluted soda was enough to ruin 2 pounds, 32 ounces of water. People fail to realize that 1 16-ounce drink is a pound of whatever it is. 2 pounds of water are destroyed by basically a cap full of soda. And people go, well, I'm never going to drink enough water to neutralize it. That's fine. Don't worry, your body is going to dump calcium into that to buffer it. It's just going to pull it out of your bones. That's where you get osteoporosis from. And they go, oh, wait a second. Really? Yeah. You can't replenish it. When I got into the research and I started to really do some clinical research, you start looking. Hiromi Shinya, Ray Kurzweil, Grossman, Young, Cousins, Brody, McKnight, Allen. They're all realizing the benefit of electrolyzed reduced water. It's not alkaline water. It's electrolyzed reduced water. That's where you get your alkalized water from. Alkalized water will be able to penetrate the aquaporin. It'll cross the blood-brain barrier. It will flush toxins from the brain, from the nervous system. It'll get glucagon out of the cells for diabetics. It does a phenomenal job. You got a question, John?
Yeah, well, on your slide here, the United States government actually hired Dr. Ray Kurzweil, who's been featured on a lot of commercials and things like that because he's a top scientist in the world. He has 17 doctorates. And he came out, I have the printout if anybody wants it, of the study that he came out with because on the water. And as you can see, he says simply the most powerful thing you can do to combat the disease process. And he has a machine. So that says a lot. And people don't realize, you know. I'm sorry?
I don't know that I have that. Would you send it to me?
Sure, yeah. That was one of the things we got about 6 years ago but the United States government actually hired him to see if this electrolyzed water was all it was cracked up to be. And he came back with a great report on it and got his own machine. And this is a guy, again, who is the top scientist in the world, has 17 doctorates.
Well, the thing for me with Shinya was the fact that Skylar had gastroschisis, and he recently retired. But when we finally got in touch with his office and the people that took it over and all that stuff, you have to be on the water in order to be a patient of his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, and I did that before I was sold on the water. I was like, still arguing with Amy about how bogus and bunk it was. And I was like, okay, maybe I need to rethink this because, you know, and I've read all of his books and they're phenomenal. I recommend them. They're sitting on the counter at our office. But yeah, when you start really doing the research, qualified research, it does it. Now, what I've done is I mentioned my email link because I've put everything together on a Pinterest board. It's Dr. Michael 8, KANGEN WATER, whatever. And it's got all the research and all the doctors and all that stuff, so it's in an easy-to-find place because, you know, when we do it in our office, I don't ever get this technical. This is a lot of answers for people that go for your what-ifs and your objections and your questions. In my office, somebody comes in to check it out. I'm like, hey, you want to try a free foot bath? And they're like, sure. Cool. And I explain how a foot bath, it increases the hydrogen charge and the blood and yada, 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 yada. And they're going to sit there for 30 minutes. I put, if they're younger, I put Stoico and Gridelli on. And if it's the older generation, I do Pat Boone and Gridelli. And they watch the video. That's it. I don't get any more technical. When they walk into the room, I'm like, hey, that was quite a sales pitch for a water unit, don't you think? And they're like, yeah. I said, come here, let's try it. And I'll have them wash their hands. I'll have them drink a glass of 9.5 water, and within 30 seconds, 9.5 water hits your brain, and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Would you like to try the water for 30 days? You're like, sure. I said, okay, here's my contingency. I want you to give up everything. If you have to have a cup of coffee in the morning, make it with a water. But don't drink sodas, teas, don't put Crystal Light in it, don't load it up with lemon. Just try the water for 30 days. You have a health condition, and this could considerably really help you. I told you what it did for Skylar. And if they say they drink a lot of sodas, I do that little, here's a cap full in 32 ounces of water. And they go, oh, okay, I can drink the water for 30 days. And I say, the other thing that I ask is, don't Google it. And they go, don't Google it. I said, yeah, because you're going to get that this is divine water from God, or it's a snake oil, and it's a scam. And I said, give me at least 2 weeks before you do any internet research and see how the water works. If it works, I'll point you to some links that'll give you some really good information. It comes from Harvard Medical, Beth Israel, other doctors. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. And they're like, okay, so just drink the water. Just drink the water. And that's really, really important.
That leads us into our next topic, too. I don't know, but this kind of ties in with it with all the doctors and everything. Because I like what you said about telling them not to Google it, because that's fantastic. And you know, I need to do that. I need to start doing that because you're exactly right. And
yeah,
so when you
start to Google stuff, it becomes you get, well, microclustering doesn't actually exist. And I have people go, well, we're telling everybody that microclustering, and it doesn't exist. And I said, no, it doesn't exist. It's a misnomer. And they go, well, am I lying? No, you're not lying. It's actually a misnomer that describes a concept. But if you rip off the hydrogen, you don't have water. You have hydrogen and a hydroxyl. If you add a hydrogen, you don't have water. It's not like a cluster of water molecules are bonded together. It's an electrostatic charge. And that's where, you know, I don't know how many people here have heard of Dr. Michael Explains, but if you go to YouTube, I have a whole bunch of videos out there just because I got sick of answering the questions 15 times a day. So there's Dr. Michael Explains the water, Dr. Michael Explains alkalinity, Michael Explains alkaline versus alkalized. I mean, there's just a slew of them, so just look at them and you can share them with people and it helps them out. And if I can help out, let me know.
Well, first of all, I have a question here, and if people have to remember that all of the good bacteria in your stomach are negatively charged. All the bad bacteria are positively charged. Dr. Michael, can you explain to me how I know you sell to a lot of doctors and how you have them incorporate this into their clinics so that their patients get the water, get informed. try the water, fall in love with it, get their own machine, etc. And how they incorporate all the people in their office to promote it.
We just give it away. I mean, it really begins that if you come into our office, we don't have a website, we don't advertise, we don't do any. You're referral only practice. You come in with a friend. We're like, hey, let's try it out, see if we're what you want. If you want to do more, great. We don't make it some unavailable thing. We just literally come in, they try us, they see what biofeedback does, they see what the SpectraVision does, they see what the tensegrity, the pulse magnecharge does, they try a foot bath. But when they sit down to do a foot bath, they watch the water video, at which point it gets them on a much more deeper level really quick about trying the water, and then we show them how dangerous the other stuff is that they're drinking, and then anybody in our staff can do it. My staff members all have units, and I did that simply because I didn't want it to be a competition within the office, and I've got a couple dozen doctors' offices on this, and what I say is anybody who wants to get on board, they can buy a unit, and one goes to the doctor, and then one goes to the next person, back to the doctor, doctor. That way, it's just kind of part of the process because doctors are different. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of patients. And part of it goes into business building. If I had one doctor on the business and he had 400 units, I would much rather have one doctor with 110 units and 3 CA members or assistants that each had 100 units. So then now I've got a 6A with 3 6As below them. That's just a building process. It's a little bit past this, but it just keeps everybody on board for growth. And over time, you just keep adding them into the system, and everybody grows.
So, but for other doctors' offices, how do they first of all inform the patients? Because you have become a unique situation. Because I've actually toyed with the idea of having like a person have a computer in the waiting room where the doctor says, hey, and I do know the doctor in Missouri, I forget her name, she actually says to the patients, she gets them in there and says, listen, first thing is, most important thing is hydration. We're going to give you this Kangen water. You're going to drink this for a month. You're going to come in and refill it. And all we ask is that you watch this 15-minute video before you leave and come in within a month and see a demonstration. That's one way she does it. She also shares the sales with her whole staff. Now, when you actually approach a doctor and they see, say, for instance, an MD, and they see this as opposed to a chiropractor, because I found the chiropractor is much easier, much more open, because, and they simply told me that, MD simply told me that they can't, unless it's FDA approved, they really can't prescribe it. So
if you get Dr. Corinne Allen's research CD, it's like $10. You can order it direct from her. I printed it out into a book, and it's all this information for electrolyzed reduced water for neurological conditions. And I say to any given doc, I mean, they've read the research. They already know it. So I tell them, you're looking for available hydrogen, right? You're looking for available oxygen and antioxidants. They said, absolutely. I said, would you be interested if I could give you more antioxidants in a glass of water than you can get in your system in a week and the available hydrogen to energize your cells? I said, I would be interested in that. I've got it on my Samsung phone, and I just have a video of me lighting my water on fire. And I said, that popping noise is the available hydrogen. Would you like to go to lunch and look at this book, and we'll flip through some of the neurological conditions and how they respond to health and wellness? If you don't want to, that's fine, but if you do, let's schedule for next week. We can go Monday at noon. I really would like to do that, and it goes from there. I don't try to convince them and talk. I don't talk alkalinity or alkalization at all. That's if I could get corporate to just eliminate the whole alkaline 9.5 thing, I could really take this company to the next level. That's their biggest misnomer because they get grouped with alkaline water ionizers, and the fact is alkaline water is dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's a fact. It's an undisputed fact. The reality is alkalized water is a completely different beast. And the SC501 is the only unit that does that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Now, okay, so when you just want to just wrap it up with the doctors here, and if anybody has any questions about this. So when a doctor, not yourself, when you have another doctor that has it in their clinic, they give it to the patients, I always feel that, and just like you do, that the most important thing is that you educate the person first before they start drinking the water. Because I can say, yeah, it's great, you got to drink this water, it's fantastic. And maybe 1 out of 10 people will believe me. But when they actually see a video and see a demonstration, now they want to drink the water. They drink the water with purpose. So it's very important that they see a video demonstration before. So how do they do that in a doctor's office? And how do you set it up in doctor's offices that do that?
again, I'm going to point to my YouTube. That one that's on the screen, Dr. Michael explains the water, breaks it down in 7 minutes, 11 minutes. I guess it's 11 minutes. To commit somebody to 30 minutes without a foot bath, I think would be difficult. But somebody will watch a 10-minute blurb, and that video actually came about simply because a lady was really excited about what she said, so I wrote it down on the board, and she said, oh, if I could just show my husband that, it would be fabulous. And I'm like, here's my phone, record it, we'll stick it on YouTube. And she's like, you do that? I'm like, sure. And I just said what I said again, and Dr. Michael Explains was born. And, they came in, they bought units. It's a short, brief explanation that's technical enough. Now, there's some stuff that I said wrong. It wasn't scripted. It was, and people go, well, you realize that you put the negative on the pot, I'm like, but it's okay. The idea was there. It was for a patient. It was never meant to be 14,000 hits. It was meant for her to take it to her husband and me to say, hey, there's something online you can check.
Yeah. Now, if you could also touch on I know we talked about it earlier, and Alzheimer's, and I know that Dr. Corinne Allen talks about it too in the information that she provides. But if you can explain about the Alzheimer's and other ADHD, OCD, things like that.
In a nutshell, for neurological conditions, whether it's MS, Alzheimer's, Asperger's, autism, your brain is the number one organ in the body for all intents and purposes. John, have you ever had an ice cream headache?
Yeah.
You get one every time you eat ice cream? No. You only get an ice cream headache when you're dehydrated. The body is going to suck all fluids right straight to the brain if it's dehydrated. So what happens is if the brain is partially dehydrated, the aquaporins go and they lock down because they don't want to lose any more fluid dissipating out of the brain. That's why a lot of your neurological conditions start in the peripheral. Just like if you get cold and you're starting to shiver, your hands get cold first. Well, if you're dehydrated, your nervous system is going to be stressed in the feet. That's why diabetics get diabetic neuropathy. They don't get diabetic neuropathy in their forehead or in their body. They get it in their legs. MS patients, it starts in the hands. The dehydration component. Well, what happens when the aquaporins shut down is you're still thinking, you're still active, you're still doing things. Your urea, ammonia, cellular byproducts, CO2 build up in your brain. So unless you can get fluid back into the brain to start crossing into the aquaporin, you're not going to detox. Well, as soon as you start to hydrate the brain and the tissues go, it starts to just flush out the toxins. A lot of our seizure kids, they'll have seizures after they have a big spike of carbs or soda or juice because it creates an acidosis. If you look at manic depressive as an extreme, manic is an alkaline 7.2 brain. Depressive is an acidic brain. And those can shift within, if 7.2 is normal, you're looking at 7.1 versus 7.3 is a huge swing. And that's where you get those issues. The water, because of the way that it's ionized, the molecules separate out with a static charge so they can feed right through that aquaporin and you start your hydration mechanism.
Yeah, I did post a YouTube video on a woman who had her daughter was getting 1 or 2 seizures a week, and she said that since she's been on the Kangen water, and again, we don't claim that the water treats, cures, or prevents any types of sicknesses or diseases, but she drank the water for a month and a half and didn't have 1 seizure. So she was really happy about that. So if we have any other questions, I would like to know what the reason the 11.5 does. Reason that the 11.5 does not emulsify all types of oil, like regular cooking oils people use.
I actually haven't had too much of a problem with it if it's fresh from the unit.
Mm-hmm.
If it's straight 11.5 right out of the unit, it does emulsify most things that I have found. I do know that for a fact that water source is extremely temperamental. I think somebody was saying earlier that you can, their 9.5 water only comes out like negative 300 because they've got a pre-filter and all this. My 9.5 is negative 650, 42, something like that. Mm-hmm. My 11.5 without the solution that I pull on a slow fill will hit almost negative 800. My with solution in goes over negative 900. Some people can't break negative 600. Depends on a water source. So the fact that it doesn't emulsify oils for you could be partially because your ionization process based on your water source is off. That'd be my guess. I'm not an expert on that.
I do know that the 2.5 is actually my favorite water because it is phenomenal with skin diseases. Psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, rosacea, acne, eczema, gangrene, even MRSA virus. And we know there's really, MRSA is probably the most deadly skin disease there is. My mom had it, and she got it in her eye, and she was spreading very quickly, and she sprayed some where it was, and went to the doctor, and the doctor says, wow, yeah, this is a really bad case of MRSA. And they actually, and said, you know, we're going to take a biopsy of it, took a biopsy of it, sent it to the lab, and it came back that it was dead. And sent it to another lab, came back dead. So just from one little dose of the 2.5 had miraculous results.
Yeah, again, if you send an email, ATS Labs did a study on that. It's an independent lab, and they actually showed MRSA, E. coli, strep, staph. They did a bunch of them. I've got the thing if you want me to send it to you. It's ATS Labs.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
I can send you that.
Yeah. But going back to the 2.5, they use that in Japan also as a pesticide. So it works fantastic. They spray it on the plants as a pesticide, and it's great for any type of pesticide for the plants. So
the benefit of the 2.5 water is it has a short lifespan acid factor. But because it's ionized, it has a high penetration rate. The reason that it works on bacteria, molds, funguses, viruses, things like that is most of those have a hard protein coat that makes it very hard to kill. That's why fever is one of the only things to kill some of them. Well, because they activate when something hydrates into the cell and says, hey, it's time to go. It's like a seed. Seed can sit dormant in the bag on the shelf forever, and you put it in the ground, it gets wet, absorbs moisture, and away it grows. Well, if you can get a virus to absorb strong acid water, it kills it from the inside almost immediately. And that's kind of the reason the electrolyzed water. We've got Dobbins Air Force Base here, and I have a light colonel that took some water and came back, and they asked if they could borrow my machine because they were testing it on. They wouldn't tell me what it was, but I do know for a fact the military is looking at a large order of SD501s for disbursement because of the 2.5 water.
Yeah.
That'll be you going to Hollywood, I'll go to the military.
Well, it's people don't realize the 2.5 is just extraordinary with what it's able to do and killing bacteria. And when you look at
Yeah, if you've got kids and they get strep throat, they gargle with it 3 times a day for 30 seconds. They're fine the next day. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And the way it works so quickly on psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, rosacea, it's just phenomenal. I've gotten amazing results with psoriasis and things like that within 3 or 4 days, where they're just like, I've never seen this before in my life, you know. So if anybody has any other questions, we'll take some questions. And as far as how much I drink personally, and when I talk to people about how much they should drink, I know that people pretty much, you give them something to do and they'll usually fall short. You know, so I know that if I tell them to drink, if I want them to drink their body weight, or half an ounce of water per pound of body weight, they usually, they won't take it as seriously. If I tell them to drink an ounce of water per pound of body weight, I know they'll fall a little bit short, but it'll be a little bit more than half an ounce of water per pound of body weight. I personally drink an ounce of water per pound of body weight, and just like Dr. Michael was talking about, you know, if you want to get rid of, he gets a question, well, you know, how long is it going to take to get rid of this? How long is it going to take to get rid of that? It all depends a lot on how much water you're drinking. If you're drinking a lot of water, you're drinking an ounce of water per pound of body weight, you're going to get a lot faster results than if you're just drinking a little bit.
Yeah,
and so again, I like to pump it up. And if you like to work out like I do, you know, I'll go through like half a gallon in one workout pretty easily, and that's in an hour. So, and if you're working out, you're going through the fluid a lot more, so you're going to need more water than a normal person. So, again, you want to, the standard answer I always say is drink an ounce of water per pound of body weight, and people are going to go, oh, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot if you're drinking Aquafina or Dasani, because you're not absorbing it. It's sitting in your stomach and it feels like a lot, but this is going to absorb a lot quicker, and you'll be able to drink more of it. So,
which brings me to one other quick thing that I get a lot of is, well, alkaline water is going to destroy the hydrochloric acid in your stomach and mess up your digestive enzymes. Skylar's living proof that is an inaccurate assumption. Again, it's electrolyzed water. And so we find, like with heartburn people, stomach issues, if they drink an 8-ounce glass of 9.5 water a half hour before they eat, that water hydrates the membrane of the stomach. You got to realize, this doesn't have to go all the way to the bowel. This starts to hydrate in your mouth. It will actually hydrate the lining of your stomach so that you can produce hydrochloric acid when you eat. It's not neutralizing the hydrochloric acid that sits there. If you've got hydrochloric acid just sitting, pooling in your stomach, you're going to have ulcers and other things like that. But if you drink it a little bit before you have the ability to produce the hydrochloric acid so you can break down your foods, and it actually improves your digestion. It's not diluting it because your body is looking for calcium, magnesium, yada, 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 to neutralize with acid. It doesn't register it that way because it's electrical.
Right. Now, I'm going to also include links too. If you guys need any answers to any questions, things like that, you can reach both Dr. Michael and I, and you can reach either one of us. And I'll include my information too. If those of you who want to take my information, that's my information also. If you guys have any questions, anything like that, you can get a hold of us. If you want to get a hold of, if you want to get a hold of Dr. Ray Kurzweil report, we can do that. Dr. Donaldson also had another report that he was going to include. That if anybody wants to get that, they can get that too. Feel free to contact us.
I've been getting requests for the Pinterest link. If you send me an email, I'll send you my cover link. It's got the Dr. Michael Explains, it's got Kangen Demo, and it's got my links to Pinterest. That's just the easiest way to do it.
And my email, which I didn't include on here, is return2 and origin@gmail. So so we're going to be doing some more webinars too. A lot of motivational webinars as well that we're going to be including. I know Dr. Donaldson has a lot of information, really gets in depth with the water. It's, you know, it's not good to bring a new person in here and talk at a level up here. We're talking at a level right here, and that's where we want to keep it for the new people. Now, once you've been involved with the Magic Water for a while and you pretty much know a lot about it and you're really understanding it and you really want to know more information, we're going to be increasing. We're going to graduate level, and we're talking about that for those people that want to hear about that, especially the doctors, things like that. So if you want to contact, I get a lot of requests
for somebody to show us how to. A lot of people keep asking me, like, how do you share the water, or how do you get your team to share the water? I think, you know, team building and team sharing and water sharing would be a good session to have. You know, because we have a very simple 5x5 program we run, things like that. Okay. So we're going to be talking about we're kind of running out of time here. I mean, we could go on and on, but I know that people have lives. So if you have any, you can see my email down there under Dr. Michelson's return to origin at Gmail. So if you need some information, if you want to find out where Dr. Donaldson, I get mixed up calling you Dr. Donaldson and Dr. Michael. So I know you go by both, but okay. So if you want to get a hold of Dr. Michael, find out where he's going to be at, where I'm going to be at. I'm going to be speaking in Encino at Eli's event, probably I think not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday. And also we're going to be coming to New Zealand. We're coming to New Zealand soon. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow as to getting that whole trip planned, and also Australia. And I want to again thank Dr. Michael for being on the Absolutely,
I'm
liking it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and again, you guys, I hope you guys like this. And if you guys have any questions or anything that you want us to cover, we can cover that. We want to make this as informative and as learning as possible for everybody. So we want to make sure, and I've learned that even though you've done this presentation before, there's a lot of new things that I learned that I'm just like, wow, you know, the litmus paper, etc. That I'm just like, wow, I didn't know that. And I do have a lot of people, they've been drinking the water for a while, and they say, yeah, I'm putting this litmus paper I'm drinking 9.5, 11.5, I'm putting that litmus paper on my tongue, and it's reading, you know, I'm a little bit acidic. You know, learning about this, now you can explain it. Pretty much nobody else knows about it. I'd say 99% of people in Enagic don't know about this.
If you have any significant change, meaning 0.2 or greater, in your blood pH or your saliva pH, you have an extremely serious metabolic condition that your body can't regulate. Because when I say that, you know, if you hold your breath, your CO2 builds up and you pass out, that's like going from 7.2 to 7.15 and you pass out. If you hyperventilate, you know, you're 7.2 and you go all the way to 7.25 and you pass out, there's a very narrow window for pH. And the primary buffering system for that is breathing. And it just is. And so what you have to be careful of is if you're changing blood serum levels like that, that's not a water issue. That's a metabolic process that's gone south real fast.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank everybody for being on the call. We're going to be back here next Saturday, right?
Should be, yeah. Sounds good to me.
We haven't talked about this, but okay. So we're doing it at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and thank you very much, Dr. Michael. And you have a fantastic day. Thank you, everybody, for being on there.
Thanks. Take on. Are you gonna call me?
Yeah, I'll give you a call.
Okay. I win.